Have people on your show been more bearish or bullish on the economy overall?
It's been a mix. That's been really interesting. There's sort of this battle between the hard landing versus the soft or no landing teams. Here's the conclusion that I've come to. In the end, they have to print. In the end, they have to come in and debase. I agree with Luke Roman, who says that the Federal Reserve's shadow third mandate is they have to make sure that the Treasury market is functioning, and they will ultimately need to come in and weaken the dollar. And so what is that good for? That's good for scarce assets like Bitcoin. That's good for probably equities. I can imagine that equities will perform well in that scenario. But ultimately, they're going to try to stay higher for longer. And I don't know how long that will be. At some point, it's just too much debt that we have to service.
If you are a crypto investor, then you know how cumbersome it can be to report your crypto transactions on taxes. There is a simpler way. CoinLedger is a crypto and NFT software which does your tax reports for you. Just sign up for a CoinLedger account and link your crypto wallets to it. That's all there is. CoinLedger will then automatically generate a tax report for you based on your transaction data. This tax report can be sent to any tax filing software, TurboTax, TurboAct, Wealthsimple, etc., or just passed on to your accountant. CoinLedger's tax report will be even generated in your local currency if you choose. The software supports DeFi and NFTs. CoinLedger is the highest rated cryptocurrency tax software platform in the world right now, which is why over 500,000 investors already use CoinLedger to help file their taxes. Use my promo code with the link in the description down below and start saving time on your tax filings with CoinLedger. Don't get caught off guard this tax season. Joining us right now at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference is Natalie Brunell. She is a famous host on YouTube. You can catch her at the Coin Stories podcast. She's the host and she's a Bitcoin educator. Welcome to Vancouver.
Well, thank you. Very kind. It's my first time in Vancouver and it's beautiful so far.
I have to ask you for my first question, because you and I spoke at Bitcoin Miami years ago. What are you doing at a resource investment conference? You're famous in the crypto world. I don't want to say you're not famous here, but that's not. This conference is not why people follow you.
Well, you know, I love branching out and meeting people where they are in different investment classes. And I'm actually really excited to be at a conference with so many gold people, gold miners, gold bugs, because I see Bitcoin as digital gold. So I think it fits right in with those hard money principles that so many people here appreciate. So it's been great to just meet people and hear about these different companies. And yeah, I feel at home.
What have you learned? What's an interesting theme that has been reoccurring this conference?
I think a really interesting theme is that the risk-free asset, the U.S. Treasury and Western sovereign debt, is no longer really risk-free. And so people are turning their focus again to hard money because they see it as having less credit and default risk, like U.S. Treasuries now have more of, and they see it as having less duration inflation risk because you know that they're going to eventually come in and print money and debase. So I think that it's a common sort of theme here, and it's something that both gold and Bitcoin answer.
Okay, Bitcoin ETF, let's talk about that first, okay? So buy the rumor, sell the news is kind of what we've seen. Were you surprised by the recent drop in the price? Is that something that surprised you?
No, I think a lot of people expected the short-term volatility and pullbacks because a lot of the capital flowed in before the approvals were made. And this has been said in the space, but it's worth repeating. I think a lot of people were overestimating the short-term outcome for Bitcoin's price, but they're underestimating what it's going to do in the long run as more and more capital flows into this space. And now it has been made easier for people with traditional brokerage accounts to just, hey, with one click, allocate a portion to Bitcoin. And it incentivizes financial advisors to finally make the recommendation. I believe there was a report saying that 70% of financial advisors would advise allocating to Bitcoin if they could, but they didn't have the ETF. Well, now they do.
So let's talk about that. Who exactly is going to buy this Bitcoin ETF?
Well, I think it's going to be a lot of people who are, they have traditional accounts. They are maybe that mom and pop investor who want everything done by their financial or wealth management advisor, as well as the pension funds, the RIAs. So I think it's going to be both a little bit of institutional as well as retail. I think it's also going to be those people who are very skeptical and nervous about buying spot Bitcoin because they see something like self-custody as a hurdle. Now, one of the reasons I do my show is to help break that down, right, and tell people that it's a lot easier than you might think. It's not as intimidating. But there is, I think, a huge portion of the population who just wants to trust a third party or an intermediary with the custodian aspect, and have them manage the asset, and I will take the benefits and the appreciation with a tiny bit of a fee.
Yeah, it's just really frustrating using these wallets when the UX is so complicated, right?
Well, I mean, at first, I think a lot of us thought that, right? But it's really about using it and becoming comfortable and educating yourself. I'll tell you a funny story. When I was 16 years old, I was scared of taking driver's classes. I was scared of driving a car. I was like, there's no way someone's going to trust me behind the wheel of a vehicle. And I took the lessons and I was like, wow, this is super easy. And now, I can drive with my eyes closed practically the places that I normally go. So I think Bitcoin's a lot of the same. You just have to kind of use it, feel comfortable with it, and then it becomes part of your day-to-day routine.
Day-to-day routine, what do you mean by that? You've been to El Salvador, where people do use it on a day-to-day routine. It's a little bit foreign to us here in Canada and North America, right? What does that mean? What does that look like?
Okay, so here, day-to-day routine for me is buy. I literally buy every single day. I dollar cost average the same amount that I would buy for a coffee or a meal, I spend in Bitcoin every single day. So I put in 10 or 20 bucks every day. Now, in El Salvador and in developing nations and the global south, a lot of people are actually using it more as a medium of exchange in circular economies, which has been really inspiring, because when I traveled to some of these countries, including El Salvador, I saw people who were able to interact with one another, pay peer-to-peer in a way that was faster and a way that they trusted more than their peso, which has been devalued.
How is it faster?
Well, it's lightning speed. I mean, with the Lightning Network, it's instant settlement and final settlement, right? When you pay with a credit card, a lot of people don't realize that you might see the transaction settle, but on the back end, banks, the correspondent banks, that whole fragile network, it takes weeks or even months to sometimes settle. And when you're transferring money globally or trying to send a remittance payment, they take a huge cut. And again, it takes weeks to settle. Well, now it's not like that. I mean, you could instantly send money via QR code to El Salvador and it will settle in that person's wallet within a couple of seconds through the Lightning Network.
Yeah, that's very interesting. When are we seeing that in North America?
Well, I think a lot of people are starting to use it more. In fact, I am an advisor for a company called Orange Pill app, and they just launched a merchant section. So it's merchants who are in the United States as well as around the world who are accepting Bitcoin and allowing you to use it as a medium of exchange and not just hodl, but support Bitcoin businesses. There's a company in Los Angeles where I used to live that accepts Bitcoin for rent. I believe it's Rick Caruso's apartment company. And you're seeing it pop up. A lot of people just want to save and hodl, but I think there's also a growing population that wants to support other Bitcoin business folks and spend their Bitcoin as well, so that we do start to use it more as a medium of exchange. No
doubt you've heard this counter argument. Why use it as a medium of exchange if it's such a good store of value?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. I do see Bitcoin more as a form of property and as the best store of value. And if you look at all of the investment classes, I mean, it really has outperformed everything over the last decade.
Sure.
And there are so many ways that our money is truly defective in terms of storing wealth for the future. So I do see it as the store of value. But when I go somewhere and they accept Bitcoin and I know that that person is maybe dealing with hyperinflation in a place like Argentina or Lebanon or wherever they might be, maybe I want to support them and help them be able to start to save in Bitcoin. So I think there's a little bit of an East meets West that I think will occur. So in the West, we see it more as a store of value. We rarely use it as a medium of exchange. In the developing nations or in places with hyperinflation, they use it more as a medium of exchange in small circular economies. And I think those two worlds will collide more and more, especially as more merchants start to accept it and you have the option of paying in Bitcoin.
Are you not concerned about Gresham's law, all right? Good money drives out the bad, or so other way around, bad money drives out the good. So Bitcoin being a superior form of money, everyone's just gonna hoard it and not actually spend it. And they're gonna spend the inferior money, fiat. And so fiat continues circulating, Bitcoin just gets hoarded, it doesn't become used, it doesn't get adopted, and the vicious cycle of not growing this user base.
Well, I think that everyone will want to save their money in Bitcoin. I really do, because it is going to hold on to the value the longest. And I see a situation over a very long time horizon where currencies start to collapse into stronger currencies like the dollar, for example. But the dollar will continue to depreciate because nation states need a flexible ledger. They're going to need to continue to print in order to finance themselves. So fiat currencies will continue to be devalued. So maybe you want to spend your dollars or spend your peso or spend your yen but you want to save your Bitcoin.
What's the consensus view on Bitcoin this year? The people that have come to your show, including your own view, how do they feel? Good, bad, neutral?
People are feeling very bullish. You know, I hope people check out my recent interview with Lynn Alden because I asked her that very question. I said, it makes me nervous when there's such a consensus that we're going to have this massive bull run and we're going to hit six figures, because we thought that the last time around. And we do still face a lot of headwinds with regards to the macro situation and geopolitics. But she had a fascinating and very thoughtful response as usual. And she talked about how Bitcoin has largely been correlated with liquidity. And it seems like we're only moving in the direction of more liquidity, especially in response to decelerating economies. So I think that Bitcoin will be the beneficiary of more liquidity, and it has been over the last year. It's outperformed pretty much everything in the last 365 days. And so I see a situation where it's going to go up. We also have the supply shock coming with the halving in about April, so that's going to add a little bit of demand on the other side as well. So we'll see. I mean, this is a dynamic situation. I never tell people to trade this or look at Bitcoin as a short-term asset that you would purchase for the next 4 months to a year. I look at this as your long-term savings plan.
In the last bull rally in 2020, right, Bitcoin dominance was, I believe, lower than it is now. The altcoin markets exploded, and we had this huge influx of capital into anything, well, Bitcoin as well, but everything else is. Now Bitcoin dominance is, I can't remember the number exactly, but about 50%.
Yeah.
What does this signal in terms of sentiment for cryptos overall?
Well, I think that there has been so much regulatory certainty surrounding Bitcoin. Bitcoin being the only commodity, Bitcoin being recognized by both the SEC and the CFTC as not being a security. So now I think people are a little bit more comfortable investing in a space that has the regulatory seal of approval. Whereas with crypto, it's still largely very uncertain. What are they going to do? How are these court cases going to play out? You know, if you look at the last couple of years, the top 10 tokens, they change every single year except for Bitcoin being at the very, very top. There's a lot of uncertainty with how these protocols will play out over the long run. I think there are a lot of technologists in the space who have good intentions, but maybe don't have a full understanding or foresight of how this is going to work in the long term. And I think the SEC will continue to come down hard on these protocols that ultimately have issuers, which make them securities. I think there may be hopefully more of a framework so that we understand better what makes a digital currency versus a security versus a commodity. But that may have to come from Congress. And seeing as this is an election year, I don't think it's a top priority.
No. What is the top priority for Congress this year from an economic perspective?
Well, I think everyone's biggest concern is inflation, and we have seen it come down, but I think it's worth reminding people that the inflation print coming down doesn't mean that prices are coming down, they're just going up at a slower pace. People are still really dealing with the cost of living increase, which is one of the best reasons to start investing in Bitcoin, because it's like a battery that will store your wealth, the hard-earned money, for the long run so you can plan for your future. And that's what I'm really concerned about, because so many people, especially today, they can't plan for that $400 emergency that comes up. They can't make necessarily their higher mortgage payments now that interest rates are higher. They're putting everything on credit cards. We're seeing credit card debt soar. We're seeing delinquencies soar. So I think that we really need to address the base layer of our economy, which is our money, and allow people the ability to easily access a global asset that can help them plan for their futures.
Have people on your show been more bearish or bullish on the economy overall?
It's been a mix. That's been really interesting. There's sort of this battle between the hard landing versus the soft or no landing teams. And I think it's going to be interesting to play out, but I'm sort of an observer from the outside, documenting everything through my podcast and what the analysts are saying. And here's the conclusion that I've come to. In the end, they have to print. In the end, they have to come in and debase. I agree with Luke Roman, who says that the Federal Reserve's shadow third mandate is they have to make sure that the Treasury market is functioning, and they will ultimately need to come in and weaken the dollar. And so what is that good for? That's good for scarce assets like Bitcoin. That's good for probably equities. I can imagine that equities will perform well in that scenario. But ultimately, they're going to try to stay higher for longer. And I don't know how long that will be. At some point, it's just too much debt that we have to service, you know? It's too much spending. Yeah. And so when they come in and have to print again, I want to be in something that can't be debased.
I want to talk about you now.
Okay.
Looking over your career, you started in media, traditional media, you now do your own show. You know what's interesting? I hosted a panel yesterday, and I asked the audience, one of my last questions for the audience, I told them, I said, who watches regularly mainstream media?
Yeah.
0 hands went up. That's an interesting trend. Is that something you've observed as well? Your personal friends or family and associates, they don't watch mainstream news as much anymore?
It's been a fascinating evolution. I grew up watching appointment television. It's why I wanted to be a broadcaster. I watched people like Barbara Walters and Diane Sawyer, and that was my dream. By the time I entered into the industry, the technology had already started to shift the business model, because now reporters were shooting everything on their own. They were even going live by themselves. Some of them were shooting things on their iPhones. And it was harder for the networks to get that advertising revenue, because now they were competing with online platforms, and YouTube took off, and Facebook as sort of a citizen journalism platform took off, and Twitter. And so I think that it has created an oversaturation of sort of information and a fragmentation of information, which on one hand creates a lot of opportunity, right? We can become independent content creators. But at the same time, it creates more of an onus on the people to determine who they actually trust. I think that there has been a great distrust in media, which is one of the reasons also why individual content creators have sort of risen to the surface, because people are looking for hope and trust in different places in a world that we can't trust anymore. So it's been an interesting kind of shift that I've seen, and I'm very grateful that I was able to leave a very comfortable, stable job to go off on my own, which would not have been possible, 2 decades ago. And I think that more and more people will continue to do that, because people are seeking information on all these different platforms that exist now.
What is your mission for your channel?
I just want to educate the average person about Bitcoin. We've done great work. There are a lot of Bitcoiners out there, but there are so many more that need to hear this message and better understand the history of money, fractional reserve banking, what money printing is, why they're going to continue to print because we're so indebted. And I just want to help deliver that message in an approachable way, because when I looked at this space at the very beginning, I was super skeptical, and I didn't have that basis of knowledge and context to really appreciate Bitcoin, because I don't think that our schools, no matter what nation you're watching this in, I don't think our schools do a good job teaching us about the financial system and the plumbing. How to invest, how the stock market works, how banking works, how the money printer works. We're not taught these very, very crucial skills and knowledge. And I just want to help people on their journey so that they understand why Bitcoin is so important and why it will change our future.
What are the biggest misconceptions about Bitcoin you keep hearing?
A lot of times I think the biggest one is that you have to buy a whole Bitcoin. Like, I don't have enough money to purchase a whole coin, and they don't realize that you could buy $10 worth of Bitcoin, just fragments. Like I said, I do every single day with dollar cost averaging. So I think that's still a big misconception. We had a big Twitter debate recently because someone thought that because Bitcoin's infinitely divisible and you have the Satoshi units, that somehow it's not scarce, which I think that they need a little bit of an economics lesson and a math lesson. But there are a lot of misconceptions because it's digital, it's new, there have been a lot of FUD headlines, and I also hope that my work will help break some of those. Okay, well, congratulations on the success of your podcast. Best of luck. Everyone should follow Natalie Brunell at our channel. We'll put the link down below. Thank you very much for coming on. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. Congratulations on your show. Thank you very much, and thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe.